Hello and welcome to the television show that puts Canadian art and artists front and center. For the next 30 minutes, we have dance, we have stop motion, we have literature, we have photography, and we have sports. Yes, you heard me right, sports. Don't worry, you're not in the wrong place. I'm your host, Amanda Paris, and this is CBC Arts Exhibitionists.
Bag of rolls. My name is Alana Patterson, and I am a photographer. There's a sticker that says works, and then I wrote questionable because I don't think it does. My project on women in sports has become sort of multi-tiered. It started with a single project on women's hockey. I was invited to shoot with an all-Indigenous girls basketball team by the sports coordinator at Squamish Nation. She was really just looking for a way to keep her team engaged. Having a photographer come down and sort of show them back to themselves as athletes would be a great way to do that. As I was shooting with them, there was such obvious benefits to the girls. Younger players would show up, and watching their confidence grow from the first couple practices to half a year in was astronomical. What we know is that girls react really positively to images of their mentors. So if you can show a girl on a regular basis images of a female athlete like her doing what she wants to do, she has an incredibly good reaction to that. Shooting film brings a very different intention to a project. People read it differently. People think about it more historically, more seriously. They reference the past.
Fingers to me, not that way.
In the photography industry, we have this thing when you're shooting digital, it's called spray and pray. If you take enough photos, there's going to be a good one, but you cannot do that on film. That's just not feasible. You have to be very intentional. You have to make your choices. Camera's getting wet today for sure. The latest project I've shot on women in sports is on Canada's swimming team. I always think it's really important to show portraits, which I love, and which people really connect with, but I always want to also show them actually doing their sport, because that's what they work so hard towards. That is their thing, you know? So I always want to make sure I have action stuff, but it's always going to be difficult in a pool. You only have the one line, you can follow them. So I knew whatever athlete was in the one closest to the, the wall, that was going to be the one I got to work with the most. I'm so sorry. I really like the direction of the project. I'm really happy with it, but it definitely is sort of a beginning point, having just shot with them once. I think aesthetically it works really great. The water looks so awesome, and the girls, they're incredible athletes. They're those are Olympic athletes. So, they're at the pool twice a day, 6 days a week. It's incredible, and it shows in their dedication, in their athleticism, in their relationship with the camera, in their confidence. They are the pinnacle of a female athlete. They blew my mind. Sometimes I walk into a room and I'll see a person and I'll know immediately how they're gonna behave in front of a camera, and it's just sort of, it's almost an innocence. They stand in front of the camera and they just don't put a mask on. It's just, this is it. This is all I have to show you. This is the deal. This is it. Because the camera creates a lot of walls for people. It's a very, very strong tool that people react to. It is a barrier for people, but there's just a certain type of person. They stand in front of the camera and they're just there. I see them standing there, and I know that I have to take their photo if they'll let me, if they'll have me, you know. I don't think I've ever been wrong about that one.
We cover many kinds of photography on this show, but it's not often that we get a chance to check out sports photography. And as a dedicated member of the Raptors bandwagon, I think it's time we saw a bit more. For more on the intersection between art and sports, or what we like to call Sparts, here is our very own Professor Lise.
I'm Professor Lise, not really a professor, and this is Art 101, not really a class. We're here to go on a deep dive of an idea, an artwork, or a story from the art world that's controversial, inexplicable, or just plain weird. You know those movies from the 1980s where the jock picks on the skinny kid with glasses, or the other way around, where the cool art kids treat the guy on the hockey team like a goon? The divide between art and sports has been vast. So today let's talk about a few examples where art and sports have been friends. Matthew Barney is an American artist who's made epic feature-length films with massive props. A lot of people might call his work dense, but here's a good way of breaking it down. Barney used to be a jock, a football player to be exact, and he made much of his early work, called Drawing Restraint, about the strong connection between the physical exertion needed for athleticism and the creative drive necessary to make an actual mark, whether it's on a canvas or a bedroom wall. In all the different versions of the series, he attached himself to bungee cords or made his studio into a rigorous obstacle course, making it an incredible physical feat just to make a single short line on a surface. Barney was making a comparison between what it takes to be an artist and what it takes to be an athlete. We have this tendency to see athleticism as disciplined and ordered, where art is unrestrained and free. But Barney was making it clear that both are forms of expression that require control and letting yourself go. So that's an example of where an athlete brought his physicality into the art studio. But what about art that simply celebrates sports and tries to close the divide between the two worlds? Terry Marceau, a performance artist from Montreal, takes on many famous people's personas to try to give us a look into their world. And I'm not talking about an impersonation, he becomes them, performing critical moments from their lives and taking on critical elements of their personality. When he did this recently with Wayne Gretzky, he called up not only what was mesmerizing about the young hockey hero, but how his physical genius invigorated everybody around him, particularly Edmonton, the town that grieved his loss to LA and still celebrates him today. This is art about sports, or at least about an athlete, and the symbolic meaning an athlete can have for a town. I'm looking at you, Kawhi. For artist Esma Mahmoud, sports became a tool to tell stories of Black identity, and they also become the core for her art. Like in Glorious Bones, where she uses 46 repurposed football helmets covered in an African wax batik print, calling up both the history and sacrifice of Black athletes over generations of football, and the beauty of the sport itself. In Blood and Tears instead of Milk and Honey, the footballs themselves are stained black and lie still on black astroturf, like a memorial or a tribute to the sport that's meant so much to North Americans. And in One of the Boys, she incorporates basketball jerseys into epic swirling gowns, calling up the inextricable connection between fashion and basketball, while she points to some of the ideas around gender that are always part of the history of sport. Why is there such a divide between the art studio and the football field? Here's an idea. Traditionally, and I'm talking ancient Greece here, sports were an arena to perform gender, to build notions of virility and strength. And maybe art's been more receptive to those whose ideas of both gender and physicality were a little more fluid. Maybe sports, which often requires team thinking, has been seen as a bit at odds with individual thinking. Each of these disparate practices informs the other. Athleticism is creative. It requires intellect, lateral thinking, and incredible mental patience. Just watch tennis finals, and you'll see that everything from Serena Williams' outfits to her serve involve a high level of intellect and creativity, not to mention an incredible performance. And art, on its side, requires physicality, patience, and drive that rivals anything that happens during practice. Who's someone you can think of that brings art and sport together? Send me a line here at CBC Arts, and together, perhaps we can stop one kid from getting pushed into their locker at lunch, or let another get through the day without being called a meathead. See you next time for more Art 101.
Hi, I'm Ghazal Tahernia, and I'm your exhibitionist in residence this week. I'm a stop-motion artist from Toronto, and you're about to see my short animation called Czar, starring this lady right over here. I hope you enjoy it.
Coming up, meet the writer bringing the history and stories of Africville to children. When I first learned about the history of Africville, I cried, and then I raged. The historic Black community in Halifax was razed to the ground by the government and replaced for years with a dog park. That tragedy is important to know, but so is the history of the community and the stories of the families who lived there. Writer Shauntay Grant has written a beautiful children's book inspired by the people of Africville, and we spoke about her work when I went there for the first time.
Take me to the end of the ocean, where waves come to rest and hug the harbor stones. Where the grass runs high up the hillside and the houses lay out like a rainbow.
So your book, Africville, is about a young girl imagining the historic community of Africville, which is literally the land that we're sitting upon right now. Can you tell me about the history of Africville?
It was a Black community located right here, right on the shores of the Bedford Basin, here in Halifax. Africville residents are descended largely from one group called the Black refugees that came here after the War of 1812. There was a school, there were stores, there were homes, there was a church. Your typical, close-knit community where families had been around for generations and land was passed down. Africville wasn't afforded some of the same services as other areas of the city, access to running water and sewage, police and fire truck and those types of services. And so in the 1960s, the city decided that rather than providing for the community, they were going to destroy it, completely raze the community and move residents out. Take me to where the pavement ends and family begins. Where my great-grandmother's name is marked in stone.
So can you tell me about this sundial?
This is a memorial that was erected to commemorate the community and remember the community. Before this place was renamed Africville again. I mean, for many it was always Africville, but after the community was raised, it became known as CV Park. But in recent years, you can see from some of the signage around here, it says Africville, so it's known as Africville. This road has been renamed to Africville Road. But before that, for the longest, this was really the only thing that you might notice if you come down to this park.
So this is your 5th children's book. So many of your books have focused on the experiences of Black folks living in the East Coast. Can you tell me why that's been important for you to document in children's books?
Because it's my home, it's my family, it's my history, it's my... Sorry, Ed. Yeah. Yeah. The stories I want to tell are here. And I just take it as a gift to, I'm grateful, to be able to tell these stories and to be able to just take time, researching local histories and sharing them, with people here, but also beyond. There's this thing in Canada where, it's a running joke in the community. You go outside of Nova Scotia and people ask where you're from and you say Nova Scotia. And then they ask where are your parents from and you say Nova Scotia. And then they ask, well, where are your great-grandparents from and you say Nova Scotia. And they look at you like, really? Yeah, really. And you could keep going back a few generations. We've been here for a long time. And that means something to me. It really means something to me. I'm just so grateful to have grown up with hearing stories and just being encouraged from my family to just know where we come from and to be proud of that, right? And I just want other kids who read the book to have that same sense of pride, whether they're connected to the ancestry or not. Where memories turn to dreams and dreams turn to hope, and hope never ends, take me to Africville.
Coming up, meet the choreographer who won massive competitions and toured with Janet Jackson, but still struggled with imposter syndrome. Years ago, Nico Archambault won the first season of So You Think You Can Dance Canada, and his career skyrocketed. The opportunities and accolades came pouring in, but then something strange happened: imposter syndrome. In spite of all the evidence to the contrary, Nico began to doubt his talent. In this episode of our digital series, The Move, Nico shares his journey to self-confidence.
There's no question that the biggest break that I got was participating in the first season of So You Think You Can Dance. That was a moment where I went from a dancer amongst a large body of dancers, and very happy to be, to all of a sudden being recognized by my name. My name is Nicolas Archambault, and my style of dance is a blend of a lot of styles, but I revert to contemporary. I didn't see myself as a confident person at all when I was growing up. I was very shy, very introverted. Interacting with other kids and with people, that was not something that came to me naturally, despite my best effort. But I was lucky that I found dance at such an early age, because even though in the rest of my everyday life I had a hard time blending in, at least I had one thing that I liked, one thing that made me feel good, and a group of kids that I could do it with. And so it was a way to connect from a distance, from a safe zone. And then through dance, so everything that I used to think were flaws had to become my strength. And in finding comfort with that, then came confidence. 10 years ago, dancers from Quebec rarely breached into the English market, let alone the United States. Even Toronto was a super big step for everyone. It was really impressive. And there was very few dancers who had accomplished it. And we also didn't dance to become famous or to become known or to be recognized. And So You Think You Can Dance broke that, shattered that rule. And so all of a sudden you have to decide if you're going to try to live up to something that you maybe never were to begin with, or if you're going to be fine with just being what you are on that day, in that moment. As a dancer, I've never had a signature move, and it's funny because it's something that we get asked as dancers. What's your power move? What's your signature move? And I never felt like I had one. But I think that I have a signature way to approach movement. We don't have to fill every second of a choreography or every second of the music, that we can allow the body to just flow with it. This contrast of tight musicality and allowing for freedom and looseness is something that I like. I like to build positions and then deconstruct them. I like to find the most cost-efficient way to move from point A to point B, and then explode, And I have a very unique way, which comes from being partially deaf. I have a really specific way that I listen to music, which in turns completely shapes how I move. I don't remember the exact moment, but I knew very early on that choreography was more interesting to me than dancing. Something about dance not being about me anymore was very important. I didn't realize it right away. When I started doing choreography, I mean, if you have a million dancers available to you, you have a million different ways of moving, a million different set of skills, a million different techniques. Every time that we've managed to do this, it felt like we had collectively created something that was greater than the sum of our parts. And I've learned now that you don't stop being a dancer because you stop dancing. You always are, and you always will be a dancer.
You can watch even more episodes of The Move on CBC Gem. If there's an artist that you think should be on CBC Arts Exhibitionist, send me a message on social media. Our handle is @CBC Arts. If you want even more eye candy, check out our Instagram feed. I may be biased, but I think it's the best looking account on the gram. Just saying. Tune in next week when we'll be doing another deep dive into the invigorating work of Canadian artists. Peace.